Stage gates, you can tell by the name. I was thinking about theatrical sets and by those gates that go up the hillside, getting closer and together, almost like flats on a stage set. That was a starting point for thinking about how to take people not into a make-believe stage, but into a place in the real world. The first time I went to Dayton to begin work on the project, I spent a good bit of time exploring the city. There was this site that I chose that stood out to me right away because as the trees were laid out on that hillside, there was a gap at the top. And it must have been early spring when I started, because the leaves were off the trees and you could see that framed view at the very top. And that really intrigued me. I believe that they told me about its being in the Olmsted Park at the time, but it wasn't something that I was really focusing on. But this site was particularly interesting. It seems to me that there was already a bit of a path up to the top of the hillside. And so it's like it became a found site. But the idea was to invite you up to the top of the hill, that you'd want to move forward between those gates that got closer and closer together as you approached the top. One of the things that was interesting me all that time was how to provide a closer connection to the land, to the landscape, to the natural environment, between the visitor and that landscape. So it's very easy to see a wooded hillside and walk away, but how could I really engage people with that place? In the later work that I'm doing, there's a very different kind of engagement that I'm attempting, which is about trying to get people, a larger population, engaged with issues of the environment. But it kind of starts with that kind of idea that was happening in stage gates. One of the things about this project that's important to note is it was sponsored by the National Endowment for the Arts. And I can't stress enough how important that the NEA was in the 70s to supporting work that allowed investigations to begin to happen. There were so many of us who were getting some kind of support to do even modest projects like this. During the construction of the project, Joan Mondale, the vice president's wife, came out and used a nail gun to help put the project up. And there was a lot of press around it to celebrate the National Endowment of the Arts. But I think back to that because since that period of the 70s, there's been so much discussion about the role of the NEA. And this was a situation where it wasn't trying to support artists and communities, for instance, which the NEA particularly focuses on now. It was focusing artists to experiment and try and find things, different ways of doing things. And I think that's something that's so important that's missing now. When I was contacted about the project and heard that the project was deteriorating and the hillside that was on wasn't in good shape, the question was, can we remove it? And I really felt badly about that since I had imagined it as something that could live on for an indefinite period of time. And in the correspondence with the Metro Parks, I brought up the question about whether it would be possible to maintain this, rebuild it, resite it. And the response was enthusiastic. People were interested in that. And I believe they've started now talking to others within the city and beyond to see if there are ways that this might be moved to another location. So it's very exciting to think that this work could continue to exist.